A little bit of a different call to worship this morning. I ask on behalf of this congregation that God grants us ears that hear, hearts that are open, and minds that will take what you'll hear today and not forget it, but be troubled by it. A mission trip isn't completed until the youth come back and report back to you. Whether we go 10 feet, 10 blocks, 10 miles, or 1,000 miles, mission work can either be done in a way that is patriarchal and oppressive, or it can be done in a way that is missional. Patriarchal is if we think we have something to offer people who are oppressed by race or by income. An authentic mission trip is one where we take ourselves, and our gifts are, yes, a little bit of labor, but also open ears, so that we dialogue with the people that we meet, and we contract with them to come back to let you know what's going on, and to see how that's going on in our community, so that you and I can work on that front. And that's about all I'm going to say today, I believe. I'm going to leave everything up to the youth. The youth have even picked the music today, and so this is our way of worshiping God, giving thanks to His congregation for supporting this youth mission trip, for the youth for having hearts and minds that are open when they go on these trips, and then lives that are changed so that hopefully their futures are shaped by what they've experienced on these trips.
Please join me in the prayer for confession. O God, you spread your table before us and invite us to dine. We judge some as unworthy to partake of your feast. We close the doors of your household to those we deem unfit to come in. You desire mercy, not sacrifice, as a response to your grace. We expect others to be thankful that we accept them at all. Forgive us our arrogance in response to your love. Make us mindful of those whom you also hold dear. God hears the confession of our hearts and our lips. Through Jesus Christ we are forgiven all our sins, and by the Holy Spirit we are empowered for new life. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Amen.
Hi, I'm Sam Gertz. This year in New Orleans, we worked through a program called Rhino. Their mission is to rebuild hope in New Orleans, and we were fortunate enough to help them in our journey. Rhino is based in St. Charles Church on St. Charles Avenue, and they coordinated our service projects and overall trip. This year, we participated in house demolition, community gardening, volunteering at a mentally disabled home, and helping with distribution at a local food shelf. Rhino, through St. Charles Church, not only organized our service projects, they also provided us with room and board. The congregation was very generous as members of the church provided us with a home-cooked meal. Our experience with St. Charles and Camp Rhino was positive, and our overall trip was possible because of them.
Hi, I'm Amelia. This is the background to working in the community gardens. This is written by Nicole Chasen, one of our wonderful mentors, and Sam's mother. Parkway Partners is a non-profit agency that aims to preserve, maintain, and beautify the green space in New Orleans. It was actually founded in New Orleans prior to Katrina and started the community activism response to budget cuts. New Orleans Department of Parks and Parkways did in the 1980s. After Hurricane Katrina, much of the efforts of Parkway Partners was dedicated to rejuvenating the city through support of community gardens, urban farms, and schoolyard gardens, tree planting, and restoration of city parks. Through our work with Rhino, we were able to work with 2 agencies that were sponsored by Parkway Parks, Edible Schoolyard, and Crisp Community, Research into Sustainable Permaculture. CRISP is a ground roots hyper-local bed of urban rejuvenation, sustainable farming and organizing and community organizing. It was founded by a local guru, an agricultural genius, Patrick Ellis, a jack of all trades, who was raised on a hobby farm in upstate New York in the 1970s. He brought his expertise down to New Orleans in order to enrich and embolden the local community by providing access to residents for food at a time when rejuvenation was very little. CRISP was built on an abandoned lot in order to reclaim waste, blighted land, and rejuvenate the immediate community. Its outreach was within a few miles of its site. The responses used to create the vegetable beds and fruit tree clusters came from the local business, resulting in the crop fruits, vegetables, and herbs provided back to the neighbors and local restaurants. Patrick is a true believer in the principles of permaculture, which includes the care for the earth through conservation and rejuvenation. 2, care for people by providing necessary food for survival, and return of surplus by recycling waste and providing substance to the community. We were able to clear more land and create beds for planting but more important, we were able to catch the glimpse of the community activism at its most local. Here was a man with a local garden reclaimed from a wasteland who was feeding his community and teaching his neighbors how to cultivate their own land. It was exciting to hear his story and witness his passion. The community around CRISP clearly benefits from the example Patrick provides. On a personal note, being and working in New Orleans made me realize the importance of hard work, commitment, and positive human interaction between different types of people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Avery King. So for one of the work sites, we were paired up with the St. Bernard Project to work on a home site. We found out that we would be doing demolition work, and we didn't know quite what to expect of this kind of work, so when we got there on the first day, it was a big shock. The house had barely been touched since Katrina. Personal items were strewn all over the floor, so you couldn't even see it. The first task we were assigned was to clear out all of the belongings, throwing away everything that could not be salvaged or reused. It was an emotional job. We were allowed to save any pictures or mementos that we thought would be the things most important to the owner. However, many of the pictures were so damaged you couldn't even see the faces, so we had to throw them away. It was heart-wrenching. I felt like I was throwing away someone's life story. I couldn't help but think about how difficult it would be for my belongings to be thrown away like that. Thinking about this was very humbling and helped me to connect to the owner, even though we never met her. By the end of the day, we had collected a lot of belongings to save for the owner. A neighbor from across the street came over to say hi and to say thank you for finally working on the house. We asked her about the owner, and it turned out that they were good friends and still in contact. The neighbor volunteered to keep the special items we had set aside for her, and she was going to send them to her. At the end of the day, it was a great feeling knowing that we had helped someone be reunited with good memories they otherwise might have lost forever.
Hi, my name's Paul, and I was also a part of Avery's group on the first day of demolition with the St. Bernard Project. And when I stepped into the house, it felt like I was stepping into someone's soul. The house was full of what looked like junk to me, but it must have been so much more to the previous tenants. Despite being filled with all kinds of stuff, the house felt empty. It was devoid of the warmth of the people whose pictures and life stories were strewn about the floors and shelves, their memories washed away by the storm. The state of disarray and disrepair in the place reflected the chaotic circumstances in which it was abandoned.
Hi, my name's Dan, and my first day in New Orleans was at the Edible Schoolyard. It was a frustrating and felt like a pointless one. I was stuck behind a bush, behind a tree, pulling up weeds and mulching. I was frustrated because all the work I was doing, it didn't feel that important or needed in New Orleans. If I was pulling weeds from the garden itself, I would have felt like my work was at least doing some good. At the Crisp Garden, I built a trellis out of bamboo that will help people get fresh food. To go from that to weeding something that didn't feel like it truly mattered was really frustrating. I think the difficulty in a mission trip is finding meaning in the work that we do.
So the scripture for today is Micah 6:8. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God?
Hi, I'm Ben. Last year, on the youth group's fall retreat, we had a discussion about what we wanted out of that year's mission trip. Much of the talk revolved around doing more social work so that we could meet the people we were helping and see the fruits of our labor. This desire arose out of the last year's mission trip to New Orleans, where one group did not get to meet the owner of the house that they worked on, while the other two groups did. After a discussion that lasted the better part of 2 hours, it was decided that wherever we went on the mission trip, we would do more work with people. We discerned later in the year that we were going back to New Orleans and changing up the work from the previous year. The organization that hosted us said that they could accommodate the desire to do more person-on-person work, and so we were all very excited to go, and for some of us, go back and do new things. When we got there, we ended up doing things a little bit differently than expected. While we did work with people at the Magnolia House, we did that for only half of the day on a couple of days, depending on which group we were in. The other work that wasn't demolition on a house was just a different type of manual labor. My group spent a lot of time at the Edible Schoolyard, pulling weeds in just about every place you could imagine a weed to grow. This kind of work didn't go over well with everyone, and that became clear on Wednesday night, the night of the infamous meltdown day. While I wouldn't call it a meltdown, there was a lot of negative sentiment going around about the type of work we were doing. The general complaint was that our work did not really help anyone significantly, and our time could have been spent doing more valuable things, like rebuilding more houses. The conversation that resulted that night also took up quite an amount of time. What made that discussion on Wednesday night such an important part of the trip was that it was completely student-run. We went around the room a few times sharing our thoughts about the meaning of the mission trip and the goal of the whole thing. Something else that made this discussion so special was the participation from nearly every single youth there. We all had something to say about why we were there and what we were doing. The conversation quickly became about the big picture. What is the purpose of the mission trip? Who are we helping? I'd like to tell you that we came out of the discussion with a clear discernment about the exact purpose of our mission work as well as the benefits, but we didn't. At the end of the day, some people still disagreed, and some still felt as though some of the work we were doing was insignificant in the grander scheme of the problem in New Orleans. What did come out of the discussion was an understanding of just how important our mission trip is. We all understood the impact that mission trips have on the community we help, our own community, and us as individuals. I personally came to a greater understanding of the educational value of the mission trip, as I feel it has adequately prepared me to be aware of my responsibility to help those who I can, as well as my ability to help those who I can. I hope that everyone came out of that group conversation feeling the same way about the mission trip as I did. But it is okay if they didn't, because even though we go on these mission trips as a big community, it is ultimately an individual journey. Even though the tension that caused the discussion was not resolved, we still went out and played Frisbee afterward.
My name is Simon. Our trip to New Orleans was fantastic. One thing that stuck with me was our visit to the Magnolia House. It was really eye-opening to see a community full of people who you wouldn't normally see. It was a great opportunity to work with mentally disabled adults because it put a new kind of perspective on life and appreciating what you have. There were times at which I maybe didn't love what we were doing, but it was okay because I knew we were making a difference even if we couldn't necessarily see it. I thought it might be a little uncomfortable having my mom come along on the trip, but it wasn't bad at all. It was kind of nice having an adult figure that I was close to. It will be different not going back to New Orleans next year, but I'm still very excited for the new opportunities ahead of us.
Hey, I'm Devin. Okay. The food shelf was an eye-opening experience for me and whoever had the luck of touching the old expired beverages first. I never had any idea how much I hated Yoo-Hoo and other assorted milk beverages until several of them exploded over the other beverages we were sorting. It set in a harsh reality that people actually had to drink these beverages that were mainly sugar, dye, and artificial flavoring, and whose outsides probably had the smell of rotten milk also. The only fruit juices generally looked like they should not be drunk by a member of the human population. I felt very much like the food shelf was a fun, lighthearted experience due to Tom that also had a depressing undertone due to the realization that those beverages are what people actually have to drink. On an off note, Tom had a problem with throwing beverages onto the conveyor belt, which led to several cans of store-brand root beer exploding. I just thought people should learn that Tom still needs to learn how to throw various items successfully. One other thing about the food shelf that was really interesting was that they sold space to food and beverage companies in their giant freezer and refrigerator. So there would be $4 bottles of Odwalla smoothies just a small distance away from mountains of store-brand donations for the food shelf.
Hi, I'm Norm, and this story is actually for the mission trip participants, since I don't think many of them knew about this interaction, and I didn't share it at the Wednesday discussion. Of course, since you're here, you can listen in as well. This is kind of a different perspective on mission work. The day I was working at the construction site, I was outside when a scrap metal collector drove up. We had just pulled an old washer and dryer out of the house, and he asked if he could have them. Joe was maybe in his early 60s, and he had a young 20-something guy helping him. He asked where we were from. We talked a little bit, and he said, well, yeah, we get a lot of northern church groups down here. But then he continued, now, don't take this the wrong way, but this really isn't what we need anymore. We need to be able to help ourselves. What good is this house if we don't have a stable society or jobs available here for us? We need help helping ourselves to move this region forward. Then he asked if we could pray together, and as the three of us clasped hands there in the street, he pointed to me and said, "You go." I'll leave a little awkward pause here, just like there was then. Anyway, later that day, I was thinking about what he said, and the three places we volunteered, the construction site, the Magnolia Center, and the schoolyard, and I realized in some ways that the gardening was helping the people help to improve themselves. It was really the only one of those three that fit that. We worked the summer there so the kids could come back in the fall and consume the produce they planted, and they could then continue to learn about healthy diets, gardening, and caring for the earth. So really, the only activity we did that met Joe's criteria for helping the people of New Orleans was pulling weeds out of those gardens.
I'm Abram. At first, when we went to the Magnolia House, I was nervous. From my previous experience with mentally disabled people at school, they were very difficult to socialize with, preferring to ignore you or not speak at all. When we were going to Magnolia House, I was expecting the people to be there to be more or less the same, and was hoping that we'd take more time touring around the place than interacting with the actual people. However, I was proven wrong when almost immediately after walking through the door, a group of people there invited us to play their game of Uno with them, even though they made up their own rules. I was even more surprised later when another one of the people staying there, even though she was too shy to ask me herself, asked our adult chaperone to bring me over so I could talk with her because she wanted to get to know me. I even later convinced her to join our game of Uno, even though she normally was too shy to talk to the other people living there. This really meant a lot to me because it showed that I could make a difference.
Hi, I'm Eric. Social work was something we as a youth group decided to pursue on our mission trip this past year. When we got to New Orleans, we were faced with all kinds of different work. Many things were not expected. Visiting Magnolia House, a home for mentally disabled adults, may have been the most eye-opening work site we went to. Volunteering at the Magnolia House was a very different experience than anything we had done before. I could feel a sense of discomfort in our group when we entered the main hall. The residents were constantly coming up to us, introducing themselves, asking our names and where we were from. However, once you got to know the residents, it got easier and easier to interact. From personal experience, I made a friend with someone named Mindy. Every day when I went back to Magnolia, I talked to Mindy. Every day she remembered something more about me. Given that she couldn't remember a previous statement within a conversation, I really felt like I had made a difference. She remembered my name, my grade, and where I'm from. We went to New Orleans to rebuild hope. I have found that rebuilding hope comes in all shapes and sizes, even if it is having the same conversation with Mindy 3 days in a row.
I'm Daniela. One of the gardens our mission trip helped in was the edible garden. The edible garden not only improves the local community with fresh fruits and vegetables, but the school community as well. Kids helped in the garden during free time, and they learned about nature and growth and how to take care of a garden in their classes. The edible garden provides a hands-on approach to this learning, and with real foods that kids can take home and say they helped grow. It teaches kids responsibility and teamwork and real-life skills and lets them love science before they know that they're learning. We got to be a part of making the magic of the edible garden real. We pulled the weeds and turned the soil and got bit by fire ants so the kids in that school could plant the seeds and water the flowers and watch their own plants grow. We helped in the edible garden doing all the things that are dull and menial over the summer so that the kids of the school who helped in the garden could continue to have fun and learn from it. A few people on the mission trip wondered why we were helping there and what our purpose was, because we weren't really doing much, but that was the whole point. We did the things that no one else would want to do over the summer so the students could continue to enjoy the garden and keep it alive year after year with their passion. We didn't do this mission trip just for ourselves. We did it to help, and we worked in the edible garden because it helped the children there a lot, and their families.
Hi, I'm Julie Schultz-Brown, and I'm one of the 5 adult volunteers who got to accompany these extraordinary 26 kids on this mission trip. I was a little nervous about it because my son was on the trip and I didn't know if I would annoy him too much. Glad to hear I didn't too badly. And I also didn't know the other kids. But I was so amazed by the gifts that each child brought and the way that each child responded to different situations. Teenagers are usually considered to be surly, self-involved, and screen-obsessed. And that was not my experience in the least, although I imagine each of them can be that at their homes. They were not that way here. They were open-minded, they were willing, they cared, they wanted to learn, they wanted to give. They knew the difference between doing for and working with. And it was a great gift for me. I'm very proud of them, and they all did walk humbly with God.
My name's Ryan. The work we did in New Orleans this year was much different from last year. My immediate reaction was that the work wasn't as gratifying because it wasn't as hands-on to rebuilding the city physically. In the months after the trip, when I think back on weeding in gardens and playing Frisbee at the Magnolia House, I'm able to call on memories not only of the people we helped and brought energy to, but my fellow youth. I read a paper in school a couple weeks ago about how setting can affect your relationship with others. And I think the setting on this trip was much more conducive to building relationships between everyone on the trip. I think we can all recall an interesting moment at the Magnolia House that brought our trip closer together and gave the people at the Magnolia House energy to face another day. I think the true gratification of the work this year is found in the relationships built, which are much more important than any nail pounded or wall painted in rebuilding a city or furthering a church community. As the last speaker, I would just want to thank all of you guys for helping send us down to New Orleans for a second year in a row. This isn't possible without you guys, so I just wanted to say thank you.
you.